Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek Program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the Education Assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are by our pedestrian entrance because there are a whole bunch of fun plants like Carex and Aspidistra and Ruscus that are mostly pest-free. I say mostly pest-free because, you know, evolution and globalization are a thing, and who knows what tomorrow may bring. But for today, we've got our research technicians, Evan Villani and Tim Alderton here, and they have pulled together a bunch of plants that are mostly pest-free, and they're going to tell us all about them and tell us how we can handle some of the pests in our landscape, and it should be a wonderful program. Those of you joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I will pass things over to Tim and Evan to tell us about some mostly pest-resistant plants.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just thinking about this and what we were going to talk about, and it's like, it's hit me. I've been here almost 20 years, and it's really, people ask me sometimes now, do you spray things in their garden? Do you have issues with this and that? We have a rabbit problem here. I will tell you that. So I can tell you what rabbits, at least our population of rabbits, doesn't eat. And we don't have a big insect issue, but there are some of those. You know, there are, it's just a couple things. It's not like everything has a problem. And some things that used to be what we thought of as pest-free totally, there's now some issues, which one of those examples is a crepe myrtle that has been a standard in our landscapes here in the Southeast forever, it seems like. But we're now finally having an issue. But there's still wonderful plants, and aside from a few minor things, they are fairly pest-free and easygoing plants. And there's some, Mark had made a list of things that we could talk about. He was planning on being here, but he's a little, his voice is not doing too well today.
Mark just got back from Asia.
Yeah,
and
he's catching up.
Every time Mark comes back from Asia, he brings a little something with him.
Yeah, so he's catching up a little bit. So yeah. He gave us some ideas, and I had actually thought of most of the things he had on his list, which was wonderful. So we were thinking on the same line. But for my almost 20 years, I got to thinking, really, I have lots of things that we can talk about that are really on the pest-free or minimal issues with in our garden. And one that I always find that a lot of us have in our gardens now, and you may have too much of if you get this plant, is Polygonatum. They're a great shade plant, dry shade at that, and you can give them away to your friends when you have too many, but there's also something else you can do with them if they're doing just too well because they are so pest-free. You can take a snack, use them in a salad. So anyways, this is one that's really pest-free as far as I'm concerned, are a lot of the Polygonatums. Dry shade, like I said, you can't go wrong with it here in the Southeast. But also has a nice tasty rhizome or stem, underground stem that you can munch on. And the rabbits don't even bother this, which is amazing because this should be good just as a carrot.
Yeah. If y'all remember the program we did where Mark and I ate a bunch of random plants.
Did you eat this too?
We ate that too, and that was honestly...
I think I told him about it.
Yeah. That was the one thing we ate that day that was actually like worth eating. Mm-hmm. Everything else was like borderline kind of strange. I guess you could eat it. That one's actually pretty yummy.
Yeah, it's not bad. There's a little bit of sweetness. It's crunchy, good in the salad. Mm-hmm. It's a little mucilaginous right now, but early in the season, I think it's better. But anyways, so...
So it's only mostly pest-free because you might get Tim digging it up and eating it.
But it's so pest-free that you might have too much of it is my thought. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The voles, I don't even think tend to bother it.
No kidding.
Because I could use them to come here and get rid of the old rhizome for that matter. But anyways, there's a lot of things that are pest-free, and we have a selection here, but do you have any beginning things that you want to talk about before we actually get into the...
What do you think,
more specifics?
On the grand scheme, what makes a plant pest-free? What stops things from wanting to munch on it so that if you wanted to look for these plants
I've been doing this for a while, but what have you noticed in your
noticed
and your beginners, your early stages in the horticultural world?
That's right. Things that are from poisonous families, things that are thorny, things that have thick foliage, things that have spiny foliage, anything that you really wouldn't want to touch or eat. Your thought process is oftentimes along the same line as insects and rabbits, and even they tend to be strong against fungi and diseases too. Not always,
sometimes,
but yes.
Yeah, some things that are fuzzy. You didn't even mention that.
Fuzzy, yes.
Fuzzy things often,
Nice
but also
pubescence.
fragrance. Things that are strongly aromatic are often fairly safe in your landscape. Yes, especially the mint family, or like you said, toxic things. But or that is if they're if you disturb the leaf, bruise things.
Things with trichomes.
Yes, they are often on the safer side in our landscapes.
Right,
and there's some that are very apparent. So.
And then there are some ancient plants like ferns where some things just don't
tends to
really
bother them.
Yeah.
So
you just don't really see anything munching on ferns.
Yeah. And some conifers, a lot of conifers are actually fairly good, but there are exceptions. It's like yesterday I stopped and was talking with a couple in the garden. They said they were trying to find some things to plant in a new bed, and they had just moved here, so they weren't familiar with the plant material. And they said Japanese yew, and I said, no, you don't want Japanese yew, which is taxus. Deer actually like to eat taxus, but what we have something more common here are cephalotaxus. Deer don't touch them, so we have some things that are exceptions, which is great. And it's not always the same. So that's just one that I have noticed over the years. So we have a few samples here, and this is just scratching the surface on what might be some ideas for you. So do you want me to start, or do you want to start, or do you see some? Do you want to talk about anything I have here?
We could switch off.
Okay, sure, that sounds good.
So this is Amorphophallus.
This is Husianus, but any of the Amorphophallus.
So
and they're
beautiful
relatives.
Foliage, beautiful stem. This is a single leaf. This is how they grow. And we were just talking about how it might be becoming a weed in our garden. like any good pest-free plant does, it reproduces. And then, so the issue with this and all family of the arum family, the Araceae, is they are a tropical species with poison in their veins.
They're not all tropical, but family, a lot of the Amorphophallus are. But a lot of things in the Araceae have these chemicals in them that you don't want to mess with them. And for one of their relatives that we grow as a houseplant, for instance, is dumb cane or Dieffenbachia, which it gets called dumb cane because there's crystals in that if you bite into it, it'll make your mouth swell.
Yeah,
and so hence you can't talk.
And these have the same kind of crystals in
the same thing.
In the phloem, right? So if you get them on your hands,
it can be irritating. So so the critters aren't going to bother that just as much as they're going to bother us. Because for that same reason.
Yeah, I tend to think of a lot of tropical plants as growing in kind of like. What was it? The old insect jar where everything has to battle against each other.
A petri dish, a petri dish.
So they develop a lot of defense mechanisms. Would you like one?
Oh, to eat one? No. Yeah, another one, a group of plants, which, I just lost my mic. That's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. Is plants in the Amaryllis family. And this is one of them right here. This is a crinum, and one of the common names of some of the crinums are poison bulbs. But this is Crinum poellii, but almost all of the Amaryllidaceae are great for this purpose. So your bulbs like Narcissus and Galanthus, so the snowdrops and daffodils are in this family. Leucojum, rain lilies, Zephyranthes and Hebranthus, Lycoris, they're all in the same family, and they're virtually pest resistant in our climate, or for us here, because no one wants to eat them. They also have some nasty chemicals in them that make it so the critters don't want to bother them too much. And a lot of them are unaffected. Like crinums, you can't kill them by underwatering them, other than the fact they'll just slow them down, and you can't really rot them either, because a lot of them can grow in very wet situations as well. So they're very well adapted to just about anything you give them. So it's just some those generalizations that we can do by looking at some of these. For me, and Evan has learned, I look at plant families, and that helps me realize sometimes, not always, what may or may not be on the dinner plate of our critter, whether our insect critters or our mammalian critters in the garden. So this is one that's pretty darn safe.
And what are some of the other relatives in Amaryllis?
So like Narcissus, the daffodils and Galanthus are some of the key ones, but there's a ton of different smaller things that are less common, which I'm blanking on at this moment. Hippeastrums, which are our florist Amaryllis. Their common name Amaryllis, not the Amaryllis belladonna, the true Amaryllis. But so many of them are pretty much safe as can be in our, at least from critters, and they're not going to have any issues with them.
Yeah.
So
Tim,
pretty safe.
Alden asked if there were any native Amaryllidaceae.
Yeah, we have Adamascus lily, for instance. We don't have a ton of them here in this area, but there are some, and there's a couple other rain lilies throughout the southeast. Both Hebranthus and Zephyranthus come up into the southeastern United States, and those are Amaryllids. There's probably some really obscure little things, but most of them are going to be Central and South America and Southern Africa, and then the Old World. I mean, Europe, you think of, that's where all the Narcissus and Galanthus are from. So we here in North America don't have a ton of native ones, but there are still some.
Yeah, I just planted a couple of South American ones in the garden
some
today.
new Zephyranthus seedlings.
So here we have Sarcococca. I'm not sure which one you grabbed.
It's the one I used yesterday. I think it's Hookerianum, and it's a subspecies, but anyway, it's Western Hills. So it's the boxwood family, and boxwoods do have some issues, but they're relatively minor for us in this area. In the mountains, they are having an issue with boxwood, a boxwood blight, a rust, which is becoming problematic. It's less of an issue here for us.
The moisture, the coolness?
It's the cool, wet conditions in the spring that I think is where it's been more of an issue. But there are also some foliar issues with some of, that is insect foliage with boxwoods. But I have not seen anything on Sarcococca.
No,
it's pretty resilient.
I've planted these from, sometimes in the nursery setting, they will get a couple pests just because everything can.
Yeah, I mean, you can get scales whenever you're in a petri dish, as you put it, of a nursery. But typically out in the garden, you're going to have very few issues.
I've planted, and once you plant them out and they go through a winter, they come back next year, and it's like you wouldn't even notice. Yeah. So. But
Sarcococca has been great for us. It doesn't have any major issues whatsoever. The only issue is you could overwater it. That's the only thing that'll really kill it, or give it full blazing sun. It wants some shade. So, you know.
It looks like you grabbed a peony here, Tim. Yes. That's not something I would normally think of as pest-free.
I mean, Mark suggested it, but they are really resilient.
It's already wilted.
The foliage on it. The peonies, I mean, why does your grandmother have, or that is, at your grandmother's house, there's still peonies that were planted by her grandmother, if you think about it.
Right.
They are so resilient, they can last decades in the landscape, unattended in reality, because they are so adapted and there's so few things that do bother them. I mean, some people will say, oh, I have ants and stuff on them, but they're actually going, the peonies actually bribe the ants. Kind of, they secrete sugars from the buds as a protecting, to say, I'll pay you to protect my flower buds, so no one else will bother me. But peonies in general are actually fairly toxic, from what I understand. They're in the Ranunculaceae, which it also includes the hellebores, which right between Evan and Blake there, hellebores are nasty, and these are similarly nasty. I think these are in the same subfamily even as hellebores, if I remember correctly. So,
and these are Hellebore fetidus, which I found has a very nice texture. I'm a big fan.
I mean, nothing likes to eat them typically. Even voles don't typically bother a peony or a hellebore.
They can be pretty susceptible to some fungal issues, botrytis, but that's if and only if you're overwatering them.
In the same way with peonies, they come from more dry climates, and that's part of the reason. Some of the ones that have been selected are more mesic growing, so and are good for our climate here in the southeast. So you picked up what? What did you
Cyclamen.
pick up? And I actually have
this. Ooh, and there's the flower right there. Beautiful. I'm sure you're all familiar with Cyclamen, a beautiful, beautiful plant that has been. A lot of people have been doing some breeding work with it recently to get those pops of color.
Those are the big flowered ones, which those are, I hate to say it, those are a little prissy and not quite so undemanding as these. This is that's heterophyll. I mean, this is Cyclamen, persicum are the ones you see at the and buy as florist in the pots in the winter and spring. Well, this is one of the truly hardy species, Heterofolium. as long as you don't put it in a wet spot, it is really resilient. They will take dry shade. They're actually becoming weeds in certain parts of the country, the Pacific Northwest in particular. But for us, they're great. They're low maintenance as well. As long as they're growing in right conditions, they do not have an issue.
And that's the dry woodland.
That's part of what getting the plant in the right place will also eliminate a lot of issues that might be secondary, like you were saying about fungal issues on hellebores.
Yeah.
So as long as you have them in the right spot, they are unaffected and nothing will bother these. So I don't even think I get herbivory by these. In the garden, I don't have a vole problem, but I don't think voles even bother cyclamen really.
And you get those beautiful clumps of silver foliage.
The foliage in the winter, and this isn't supposed to be growing now. It's like a month early flowering, and there's still foliage on some of my heterofoliums, which should be sleeping through the summer months and not pop back up until
it's been very cool.
October, November. So
spring has been very cool.
And we've been moderate. It's been moderate. It hasn't been cold.
Well, very often we go straight from winter into summer. And we've actually had spring this year, which is pretty special.
And then another thing that Tim touched on that I think is a very important theme of this whole midweek is that if you put the plant in the right place and you treat it right, it will be experiencing less stress. And stress is what often does a plant in, where it starts letting in those insect plants and those fungal pests, is also if you're not pruning it right. Things that you might do where you plant it or how you prune it that stress the plant out are allowing the plant, it's weakening the plant's defenses.
Sometimes you can be too nice to a plant too, I find.
Oh?
If you give things too much nutrients on something that does not want high nutrients, it will make it shorter lived. And I joke that some plants that that we grow, they're from dry, really nasty, hot, dry Mediterranean climates, but we don't have that here. We have these really good soils. They're shorter lived here. In the wild, they might live for a really long amount of time because they're just, it's when you hear about that person who lived to 105 and they lived through a famine and they didn't have an extra ounce of fat on their body. It's the same way with plants. If they're actually getting stressed a little bit in a healthy way, they tend to do better than if they're babied to the point that they're not allowed to adapt and to the situation they're at.
The Lomatia that I talked about yesterday it's allergic to phosphate.
Yes,
phosphate is almost like poison to it. So
it's in the proteaceae is highly I
don't know why some of these plants adapt this way, but they do.
A lot of proteaceae
to increase the efficiency of their nutrients.
They came about in climates that there are places in the world where there was no phosphorus in the soil. And so like Australia is where a lot of those came from. I almost picked some Lomatia because it is rather low maintenance for us, but they are intolerant of phosphorus. So you can feed it to too much, or it's an unhealthy diet, and it's the same idea. So,
and speaking of feeding too much,
it opens up to insects.
Yeah, for sure. If you apply enough nitrogen, then all of a sudden you'll get a whole bunch of aphids that want to come and suck the phloem out of there.
Exactly. So if you're a little bit on the stingy side with your plants, food-wise, you're often going to be better off than if you overdo it.
Yeah. Force them to be strong.
Yes.
So much like this Asarum, that Cyclamen, this is a similar form of plant. Asarum, not Heterophila.
This is Maximum.
Maximum. Nice big leaf, good variegation.
Is that Ling Ling?
This is Ling Ling.
Yeah. I often confuse Cyclamen and Asarum when I first started looking at plants, just because
that's fair
the
enough.
leaves look similar.
Yeah.
And
this is a native for us.
No, that's not.
It's not.
That is not a native.
Maxima is not a native.
That's an Asian one. But you have Acerums typically there's one species, I think, one or two species in Europe. Then you have a ton in Asia. And we have quite a few here, especially in Eastern North America.
Shuttleworthy eye.
Yes.
Asarum canadense.
They're finding more species, as Evan knows, here in the mountains of North Carolina and South Carolina. They're finding new species all the time. But anyways, this is not one of our native ones. It's one of the Asian ones. But these have chemicals in them that discourage predation and herbivory. And a close relative of this that we have in our geophyte border is a species of pipevine, Aristolochia fimbriata, which also has these chemicals in it. But it is eaten, but by only one thing. It's the pipevine swallowtail, which has a mutualistic association with it, more or less. It makes the butterfly, the caterpillars toxic or taste bad, at least to the birds, so they don't bother them. And the pipevine gets a pruning, and then it comes right back up. They're fine and dandy. They have no problem dealing with the swallowtails munching on them.
People will come and tell us, like, you have a pest on that.
Yeah. So we had to put signs up saying, no, we don't.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Shout out to the education.
Exactly.
You did a great job with those signs, by the way.
Yeah. So anyways, this probably has some of the same chemicals in it, I would guess. But it also has, being that it is a ginger, it has a spicy fragrance to it. So a lot of our native or animals that are native where these are at typically tend not to go for that, because there are deer and stuff also native in Southeast Asia where these are from, as well as our own.
So all your gingers and gingibers?
Those are not related to this at all, but yes, but they are equally pest resistant. It's like some of the tropical things, for instance, cannas have a few things that they get. Leaf roller and Japanese beetles. And bananas kind of the same way. Japanese beetles might be about the only thing I know that'll go after a banana, but hedychiums, these things, the deer won't, I think they're afraid of them. They don't know what to think when they see these broad-leaved things. So they're safe. And the gingers have been, I think, the safest in reality. I don't even think I've ever seen a Japanese beetle on them, but they have those wonderful fragrance on the rhizome, sometimes in the foliage. I don't know if this one has it. There's a little bit, I can smell the ginger coming out of this. So a lot of our herbivores around here do not like to deal with that as well. So it's really healthy for us to use in our own diet, though. But some of your gingers are going to be great for that. I can't think of any diseases with them unless you go too far north for them. That's the only way you can get rid of your gingers. So
here we have Callistemon Woodlander's Red.
Yeah,
we might all be familiar with this. This has been distributed a couple times.
Yeah, and we actually have this on for sale right now, and on our plant cart, which is really cool. It's in full flower right now. It's in the Myrtaceae, which is a really chemically active family as well. Mostly southern hemisphere and aromatic. You think of eucalyptus as probably one of the biggest groups of plants in this family, and this is also from
fruits too.
Actually. Yes, fruits. Which one?
The Chinese.
That wasn't the one I was thinking of, but
there's a couple Chinese Myrtis relatives that we're trying to get.
Oh, okay. You're thinking of Morella Rubens, or
yes,
yeah. Okay, I've killed that one.
Oh,
but yeah, what I was thinking of is, what do we like to eat the flower petals of?
Oh, Acacelliana.
Acacelliana is in the same family, and I don't know that it gets anything either. But a lot of the Myrtaceae has been really, if you can grow it here, that is, they're disease free, and the callistemums are nothing different there. And so there's a lot of oils involved with them. Where they're often in fire-prone areas, so they're accustomed to being burnt, and so it renews them. And those same oils often, I think, are probably what helps protect them from herbivory. A lot of it. There's only a few things.
Tough leaf.
Tough leaf.
You wouldn't want to stick your hand
exactly.
Into the bush.
Some of them are actually prickly. We have another one down in the
that I pruned the other day.
Yes, it's not as hardy. That one's not as hardy.
No, it dies back during the winter,
and then you have to clean it up, and it's sharp.
Yes.
But think of, there aren't many things apparently that eat eucalyptus aside from like koalas. They're one of those exceptions. They're like pandas of Australia.
To my knowledge, we don't have koalas here. So
we don't. So, but anyways, it's those chemicals in there and that make so few things want to eat them. So we don't have to worry about that. So what else do I have here? Speaking of pandas and ling we had earlier, grasses, a lot of, actually, if you think about it, ornamental grasses, including bamboos. And you say, bamboo, oh no! This is a Fargesia. This is a clumping bamboo. These are really very disease resistant for us, and nothing eats them either. The deer don't bother them. The voles might, come in from the ground if rabbits don't bother them either. So something else that you can try is, like I said, so many of our ornamental grasses, they're really unlike what we feed our horses, they're getting high quality grasses and stuff. And deer, they do eat some grass. It's not their favorite thing in reality to be eating. So the deer that we have in our woods are not going after the grasses that we have in our landscapes. So they tend to be really safe. And so few of them get diseases. Occasionally you'll get some rust and things. Now that one,
all right, here's an Ardisia.
I do have one thing that those will sometimes get. Ardisias, they're on the edge for us to grow here, but we can grow them.
They grow just fine.
And they're great little ground covers, but I've had azalea lace bugs on them. That's one of the few things I will get and have an issue with on those. But other than that, they're pretty resilient little plants as a ground cover.
So I'd like you to change my mind right here, right now on camera. I'm personally not an Ardisia fan, except or at least this species, Japonica.
This is Japonica. This is the one that's best for us.
I find that it's too aggressive as a ground cover.
They can be, but a lot of them aren't. I mean, the green ones, some of the variegated ones are so weak, I hate to say it. But this is Andre the Giant, which has been one that's fairly vigorous, and that might be why you've seen it.
It's whatever one they plant on NC State campus.
I don't know what they do.
It's the same. It's like the same effect as Liriope. It just takes over the entire space.
They're using it because it is low maintenance and nothing wants to eat it.
Right.
Yeah.
And as far as ground covers go, that's what people want in a ground cover.
Yeah, they want it to cover.
Ground cover.
Yeah.
They want it to be aggressive. So.
It's true.
But some of the other, like the pure green ones are pretty good.
In a small space to begin with. Okay.
That was one of Mark's suggestions too. So.
Mark is an Ardisia fan.
Yes, he is. There's actually a few things we have in here from the
Salvia,
mint family.
Buddleja.
I just about lost something else here. Yeah, salvia and that's a little bit for later on. But yes, things in the mint family are often really resistant, at least to herbivory. Some of them do get some foliar issues and can melt away because of that, but they're typically fairly easygoing. There's so many salvias available. This is a Farinacea hybrid that we have in the garden. And then right here, there's over 900 species of salvia. So there's a couple that actually do fairly well here and are really low maintenance. Deer don't bother them. The rabbits don't even bother them. So they're great pollinator plants. They can get things like mealybugs and stuff occasionally, but that tends to be when there's high pressure on the mealybugs late in the season and stuff. Actually, there's a lot of them, but they tend to be fine and dandy with them in general. When they're growing them in, like we said, in less than ideal conditions is when you tend to get those issues. Another thing that's in that same family you don't realize is the Buddleja, and some of the Buddleja, they don't like excessively wet spots, but this is my favorite one, and I've talked about it all the time. Don't grow this, of course, for its flowers, but this is Buddleja loricata, and you can see why no one would want to eat it. It's covered in fuzz, and as we were talking about earlier on in the day, it's not overly fragrant or anything, but there is that dryness that puts in your mouth. I'm assuming that the deer find the same way, that they might not want to be chewing on a piece of fabric. Okay. This is one, it is called I think mountain sage. It's from South Africa. So I'm sure they use this as an herb, but
yeah, it's not good.
It's not good. So anyways, but yeah, this is one I think it's fuzzy in all aspects. And actually in the winter when it's drier, it almost will expel some dust into the air. So, but they tend to be fairly disease resistant for us here. So about the only way, like I said, you can kill a Buddleja is to overwater it.
We'll finish out, I think, the plants from our xeric garden with a punica.
Yeah.
Which one is this?
I don't remember what the cultivar is, but it's one of our several ornamental pomegranates that we have in the garden. And but in general, they have been very resilient. I don't remember seeing any disease on them or insects on them in my years working here. I don't know if deer would bother them. I doubt it. They don't tend to go after their relatives, which, do you remember what some of the relatives are? I did mention one earlier.
I'm just thinking that putting that leaf in my mouth was a big mistake.
That's why the deer don't want to eat the bud leaf.
That's terrible. Oh, I'm tearing up. Oh gosh, not off the top of my head, Tim. I'm sorry.
Okay, crepe myrtles. Aside from that crepe myrtle scale, there's nothing in Kufia.
Yeah.
So are both related to this, and I have no issues with anybody eating either of those. So I think this is the same.
None of our guests.
Yeah, none of our guests. Actually, they do get the fruit in the fall. If there are some fruit that form, they tend to break them off before I can get to them. But yeah. I've not had any insect or disease issues with those. So those are some cool ones. And that orange blossom is just so cool. Even on the fruiting ones tend to be single flowered. The double flowered ones are often just more ornamental, and the quality of the fruit is reduced in that. But so what is that one right there?
This is Epimedium.
Yeah, that's an Epimedium. No, it's a hybrid, but that's Domino if I remember right. But anyways, Epimediums are really good for disease resistance as well. So,
and they're always one of my
great for dry shade. Again, one of the few ways to kill it is to overwater it. That's about the only thing. And speaking of watering, Evan needs to get a drink. So anyways, so these are great. Nothing eats these that I'm aware of either. So, the horny goatweed, and Dennis has filled you in on that other times, I believe.
Yes, he has.
You can find out on one of our videos from previous times if you really want to find out what I'm talking about. But anyways, there's chemicals in this too, again, that inhibit herbivory. So it's really safe. So I'm going to go to something a little prettier. Alstroemeria. I've never had anything touch my Alstroemeria in the garden. These are from South America, and I saw some growing in the wild, but not where they would be. There weren't a lot of things to eat them there. But anyways, I've never had anything eat these in the garden. The only thing with them is they do tend to go summer dormant for us, which is a natural coping mechanism to deal with heat or cold. And they go dormant in the winter and they go dormant in the summer. So, but the branch that is spring and fall, they are happy as a clam and they do their thing most of the time. And so,
yeah, that's one that you give away.
Yeah, this is what they use these for florist industry too, if that should tell you something, because they're cheap cuts. And I have a feeling it's because they can grow these in greenhouses, they can grow them in fields, and there is very little input needed that is spraying to keep them at high quality. And so again, they make a really good garden plant as a result of that too. We don't have to treat them for anything. So just a nice cut flower plant there. Large group of plants that have been around for millennia and millennia and millennia. Some of the early ones are the ferns. Ferns typically, at least out in the landscape, have very few issues. You may run into some scales occasionally, but the deer don't bother them. This is a Coniagrame. Yori Mushu, I think, is this one, which is a favorite of mine. And it's as clean as ever. And this one is actually, I have it growing on a rock in our cascade that barely gets any water, actually. I have it growing in the ground in the Asian Valley. I have it growing irrigated in the lath house. And all places, it is happy as a clam. Not all ferns are that content, but this one is one of those. But again, like we were talking, they're so easy-going. They don't need a lot of, fertilizer. Ferns started evolving before the soils were good. So a lot of them don't need a really rich soil to deal with, but they do typically not want to dry out entirely. There are exceptions to that rule on everything, including ferns. But great pest resistant plant here for us.
And an incredibly unique texture.
Yeah, on that one in particular. That one. I mean, there's thousands of species of fern, and so they fit into all different ecosystems, from the deserts to waterfalls. Sure. And there are even ones that grow aquatically too. So, but to add to the fact that we have them in our typical mesic gardens. So, Not a fern, though, but fern in name, common name that is, are the asparagus ferns or asparagus. Edible asparagus will get asparagus beetle. I don't know if I've never had it here in the garden. I do remember having it back home in Pennsylvania on our edible asparagus, which I personally don't like. I like this one. I will eat this one. This is Asparagus microrhapus, which is a South African species, and it is like candy whenever it starts growing in late February and early March. But anyways, asparagus typically have few, if any, diseases to them. The foliage or the green parts of it are so reduced. I mean, they're very big, but there's not much to it. So there's not much to get a hold of to cause an issue or for someone to attach to.
Yeah.
I don't remember scales on them, but I mean, or anything. So in our climate, they are great low maintenance perennials. And they, again, add texture to the landscape.
I love the growth habit of that one.
Yeah.
The way we've got it growing in our
tutor, and it's bigger than the tutor.
Yeah, for sure. But it swallows that.
Yeah,
it swallows, but also is in and amongst it, and just it's graceful. It's hanging, but held up. It's just a very wonderful symphony.
When I cut it back in the winter, or late fall, it's this billowy, wiry thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It
but
doesn't
for the whole
have anything.
Year, it looks fuzzy and fun and like you want to give it a whole hug. You could pet it, which is very nice.
It's not bristly, it's not sharp or anything.
Yeah.
So what is that?
A Hemamelis?
No, but close. It's in that family. No, this is a Corylopsis, but those are good guesses, and those are both, again, chemically reactive. This is Corylopsis, or Corylopsis. I'm sorry, Corylopsis, and it's the same family. And again, the Hemamelidaceae has some fairly chemically reactive plants in it. They're are used herbally, witch hazels, which are used as a liniment, and not too many things will eat them, and nor will they eat this Corylopsis either. So, or the Fothergilla for that matter.
Not a lot of pruning needed on these either, right?
No, those don't. That just tends to be widespread, and you just have to contain it when they're happy. Give it adequate space to go to the sides. They aren't terribly tall, but they tend to be wide. So some other things we have in here are, like I said earlier, we have some conifers.
Cryptomeria japonica,
this is a Cryptomeria.
Macrophylla?
It's one of the macrophylla. Podocarps, they might get scales occasionally, but that's typically under really bad conditions. I mean, they're drought tolerant, they're shade tolerant, they're sun tolerant. They wouldn't want wet. That's about the only thing that's going to kill a Podocarpus. I don't think anything eats them. Rabbits don't bother them for me. I doubt deer do, and they can take hedging anyways. So,
I think Longwood does a Podocarpus hedge.
It would be inside there. They wouldn't be able to do it outside.
Oh, maybe I'm misremembering.
Yeah, you see a lot of Podocarps in Japan pruned in sort of that quintessential Japanese style, like the cloud pruning, little tough.
Right.
They do very, very well with that sort
They are super resilient.
Yes.
And they've been around. So, there aren't too many things that we have that will bother them here. And I find them just great landscape plants for us.
For sure.
And they're underused in reality, but they can be used for hedging. And that's what I often do see them as. Yeah. But you can also grow them as a specimen plant as well.
Definitely. So, I love the Akame cultivar with the red new growth.
If you get it in good light, it will have red new growth. And there's some yellow ones as well as variegated.
For sure.
This one was just a generic seedling that I have. It came off of, I think, Edgefield, which was over here. It was a seedling decades ago, and I put it in the Japanese garden. It's now about 20 feet tall. And it's had a wall built by it within inches of its trunk, and it didn't phased. So just resilient plants. Even if someone did decide to trim it a little to have a snack or taste it, it wouldn't hurt it. And I think the same would happen in your own landscapes. Cryptomerias, they can have a few issues on older branches, but they tend to be fairly resilient in our landscapes as well. And I don't know of any specific insects that bother them. They'll get some browning out, but other than that, that tends to be on the older growth in the inside. As long as they're given adequate light and air circulation, they are disease and pest free. Yeah. And you can get them that range from 2 feet tall to
60.
50, 60, 100 feet tall if we had long enough for them to grow. Because you've probably seen them in Japan that are literally forests.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I've only seen them, 60 maybe feet tall. Some more fun things here. A lot of the Araliaceae. This is a Fatsia japonica. It can have cold damage on our climate even, and I have some that do get that sometimes, but we're on the edge. Typically, not too many things will go after that. Like I said, there's those things that have big leaves, I think sometimes scare our deer, which is a good thing. And I chose the smallest leaf I could find because I didn't want it to literally
Take
be
up the
whole place here. So other things that I hate to say it are related to this, English ivy. It doesn't have too many diseases and insect issues, and I hate to say it, I wish it would. You can get scales and stuff on these, but it tends to be under bad culture. So in your home landscape, it's typically not going to have any issue. At the coast, they grow literally like weeds. Here, like I said, if we have a bad winter, they can get some damage, but they tend to be resilient and come right back from that. But that was a nifty one to try. And I couldn't believe that Mark didn't put this one on his list. And I had to add it. Aucuba. Aucubas, I love Aucubas. They look diseased, but they're not diseased. Deer may nibble at them a little bit.
Sure.
And that might be part of the thing. But in the garden here, I don't have deer. So I have rabbits, and the rabbits don't even bother them. That's my indicator if it's a good plant. The rabbits don't bother. So anyways, Aucuba's a good one to try. Another oddball one, and we have the really, this is mountain dove. Daphnophyllums are something that is not bothered by insects or disease much. Again, under bad conditions, you could probably get scale insects on it, but in the garden, they are super resilient plants and no issues for them whatsoever. Going back to some flowering things, we have orchids, Bottlebrush orchids. My only issue is with some of the early flowering species of Bottlebrush, the common one called Bottlebrush striata, which is typically pink or white. They flower so early here that they get frost damage. They don't get insect damage. Well, this is Bottlebrush Ocracea?
Yeah,
Did I say it right? Okay.
Nailed it.
I have to think about it. This is a summer flowering one, and there's some new hybrids, which are also these summer flowering hybrids, which can be pink or cream or white as well to add to the yellow. They are great, resilient plants that nothing is going to bother for you.
Another ancient plant, right?
They're not really ancient. Orchids are on the very recent evolutionary scale, relatively speaking, of plants, yes, of flowering plants.
Never mind.
They're fairly new in the world of plants.
But there is an argument that it's the most prolific.
It
genus.
is. There's more, or family, not genus.
Family, my bad.
Yes, there's like 10, 15 million species or something like that estimated. So it's crazy, or maybe not species. 1,000 species or something like 1,000. that. 1,000 species. It's like, or maybe it's 10 to 20,000 species. It's a lot more than most any other group of plants. So, and includes this one here, which is growing behind us, which gets no good growth. I didn't plant this plant. It's so resilient. It came in on its own. This is Epicacus. Epicactus. Epipactus. I can't spit it out. Helleborine. Is that the specific epitaph?
That's the common name. I can't find a specific epithet.
I think it's Helleborine.
Okay.
It's a weed.
Oh yeah.
Orchid.
Yeah, Helleborine. That works. Yeah.
It's a weedy orchid that was brought in actually as an herb in colonial periods. There are a few leaf hoppers on it, but it's so well adjusted here that it is actually a weed throughout the eastern United States and the Pacific Northwest. Any place that's not terrible. I've seen it growing as a weed in commercial landscape in Pennsylvania. I've heard it's naturalized in the woods in parts of eastern Pennsylvania, not where I'm from, but still, it's naturalized underneath this oak. I tried pulling it out for years and I've given up. So but anyways, so orchids, we think of them as being troublesome and finicky. They really aren't. They are very well adjusted as long as they're getting in the right conditions. And again, it goes back to that right conditions, that they're not, any plant is not going to have any major issues, whether it's on our landscape or in our homes, even for that matter. They are probably going to be fine and dandy. It's just taking into account what they are accustomed to having and finding that niche to put it in. And I've been, again, like I said, with 19 years plus here now, I don't spray much. There are exceptions, and I mean, I don't do it anymore, but we used to spray the roses. We don't do that anymore now. We are even finding roses that are fairly disease resistant, aside from the fact there are some things like rose rosette virus, which are beyond what treatments are known at this point to deal with. And that's flying in from miles away, actually a mite that's carrying disease. But all in all, you can find something that is fairly, if it's adapted to your climate and the environment you have to plant it in, it's probably going to be a good grower in reality. And there are low maintenance, and plants can, I mean, you could almost consider everything at some point a fairly pest-resistant plant.
Well, I mean, really, it's about balancing the ecosystem.
Exactly, and that's what we have to look at it as an ecosystem, and we don't always have that in our home landscapes. Right,
for sure. But if you've got that balance, then you've got the checks, you've got the balances, you've got things eating each other, keeping everything in check, and then then it all becomes pest.
So, and that's the problem sometimes we do, I think, is we try to treat a whole everything, and we wipe out that balance.
And you use a broad spectrum.
And so so here in the garden, like I was mentioning, the crepe myrtles, we've recently had them treated, but we've done it specific to them and not to everything.
Right.
And so we aren't wiping out the other adjacent ecosystem. So there is going to still be a balance there. And so I don't know. Is
that's great. We did have a couple of questions that came in. First off, Jared was curious if exfoliating bark on trees, if that's a mechanism for deterring pests.
That's what, like Mark would always suggest that on the crepe myrtles.
Okay.
Though with the crepe myrtle scale, it's been a little bit different because they kind of start moving before this, the exfoliating bark. They move, and then they're still able to be on the plant during that period. And they also get on the tips of the growth, but where it's non-exfoliating. Even to keep things clean, like you won't see lichen on a lot of trees that have exfoliating bark, or epiphytic plants or other epiphytes, they are moving them off. So, and that was an observation I hadn't ever thought about until he mentioned that. So a lot of those plants with exfoliating bark are going to shed some of those issues, though it just depends on the timing. And I think, like I said, that's part of the issue with the crepe myrtle scale. It's adapted to that timing that the crepe myrtle has.
Okay.
So it's specific to the crepe myrtle. So that is why it's probably being a problem for us.
For sure.
But there's no other really major issues with them.
Okay. And as part of that question, he was also asserting that like the majority of those plants with exfoliating bark, they seem to be coming from Asia.
Yeah, we have a lot of them. We do have probably some here, if you think about it. Maybe not birches, for instance.
Sure.
Platanus is also, the plains trees or sycamores.
Right.
Those have it.
Our dear sweet hydrangea quercifolia.
Exactly. Oak leaf hydrangea. I mean, if you think about it on a different scale, even some of the hickories and oaks, they do have these barks that flake off.
Yeah.
So yes, we do have some, maybe not to the same extent, but everything in China, there's a dozen more species than we have for everyone we have here in reality.
Of trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Diane wants to know if epimediums can be grown in pots in dense shade.
I think you just have to get the moisture right.
Sure.
Because they're not always the biggest growers in containers, but I've never left them in one for long. I wouldn't know why not.
No kidding.
As long as you got the media to a liking for them, I think you'd be fine. You might want to do larger containers, not small containers.
Any particular reason why larger rather than smaller?
Small containers, smaller environment, more fluctuation.
Exactly. You're going to have
it's for all
temperature,
things, nutrients
and moisture.
Yeah. You want
that
the
bigger root zone.
For sure. And I just did a quick Google of the hardiness for Epimediums.
Some of them
go down to 4.
Some depending on the species.
Yeah. So they should be cold hardy enough that you don't have to worry too bad
in our
about
climate.
overwintering.
My concern would be the moisture. Yeah. If you get the moisture right, I think you're fine.
Absolutely.
And I could see in a smaller pot they'd be too wet, or the extremes, too wet or too dry. They can take drying out, but in a larger container, they would have more root area to.
So hopefully some of the roots are touching, getting
moisture.
Air pockets, and some of them
moisture.
are getting moisture.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So Carolyn has a variegated Andre the Giant Ardisia.
Yeah.
And she says that there are sports coming off the roots that are hardy, but Andre the Giant seems to die back. And the sports coming back the sports are not variegated, whereas the variegated portion is dying back.
So she
wants to know, I assume she's around these parts, but she's wondering how can she protect the Ardisia how can she protect the variegated shoots of the Ardisia so that they don't die back to the ground?
Is it outside?
I assume
I hate to say it. Go to Cotenenge style and grow it in a container.
Sure.
That's how we started. We had actually, what's the one?
Luchador.
Luchador. That is a mutation of Andre the Giant that Mark named. That I think I found the mutation. I think I found 2 mutations, and one of them got named.
I love that.
And that's why it's the wrestling.
You're just casually discovering plants.
So often and Ardisias tend to be fairly unstable. So maybe she has another mutation too.
Honestly,
but I would pot it up.
Sure.
And grow it in a container, especially if she's on a borderline area. I mean, a lot of the variegated Ardisias for us will get burnt to the ground.
For sure. And part of the fun of the Cotenenge is pairing the plant with the pot.
container.
So you get to go shopping for fancy pots. You get to coordinate the color and the texture of the pot with the color and the texture of the plant. Like you can have all kinds of fun with it.
And who knows Ardisias can have these funky crinkly things. The variegation on them tends to mutate the shape of the leaf as well as the texture of the leaf too. So who knows? Yeah.
Sure. But basically,
I would try growing some of it in a container until you get more of it too, and just have it as a backup. So if it does not make it through a winter sometime, or she could protect either with mulch or something, loose leaf mulch through the winter, over top those shoots.
No kidding.
To try to give it just a little extra insulation.
Yeah, for sure.
Because sometimes variegation reduces the hardiness of a plant.
No kidding. Jared wants to know if we have been lucky enough to have spotted lanternflies in NC yet.
They are in NC. I have not seen any. I've heard about them.
This is Jared up in Pennsylvania. Yes. He wants to know if we've got them down here yet.
We have not had them here yet, but they were reported just a week or two ago in the center part of the state.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Last year at Cullowhee, there was actually a discussion of can we be using a fungi to combat them? The answer was maybe.
I don't know. I don't know what their treatment. They're working on it further north, so let's hope they figure it all out before it becomes a major issue here.
But it's expected.
It's expected. It'll probably it has reached North Carolina, but not to any great extent yet, from what I understand.
Okay.
I've never actually saw one in person, even when I've been home to Pennsylvania.
Sure.
They're worse in the eastern part of the state, from what I understand.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, that is all of the time that we have for today. So Thank you so much, Evan and Tim, for pulling together all these plants and telling us about the pest-free plants. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the Midweek program. I remembered last week to look what we're doing next week. Did not remember to do that this week. Oh, but next week we're going to be doing our rare plant auction highlights. The weird, the rare, and the just plain ugly with Mark. So that should be all kinds of wonderful. We will see you all next time. Y'all take care.